Good afternoon, everybody. It's so wonderful to see all of you in this light-filled space. I am Amir Pasek, the Eugene R. Temple Dean of the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. Welcome to the 20th Thomas H. Lake Lecture. It's wonderful to see you here. The Lake Lecture, presented by the Lake Institute on Faith and Giving at our school, is one of the highlights of each year, as we gather with noted experts on public conversations at the nexus of philanthropy and faith, to explore how they affect and are influenced by key aspects of personal and community life. It is such a privilege to be in community with you to consider the power of philanthropy and generosity when so much of our world is enamored by the possibilities of coercion to make things happen. I hope you are full of curiosity with us as we explore how generosity can be a potent alternative to making things happen in the world, and to do so with joy. To begin our program this afternoon, I am pleased to welcome the leader of the Lake Institute, Dr. David King, who is also the Karen Lake Buttry Director of the Institute and Associate Professor of Philanthropic Studies at our school. Dr. King is nationally recognized as one of the leading experts nationally and internationally on faith and philanthropy, and he has spoken and taught internationally as well, including at the University of Edinburgh, where he served as a Fulbright professor. He and the Lake Institute continue to serve at the vanguard of advancing research, scholarship, and professional practice in the field, including equipping donors, clergy, and congregations with insights and tools to explore questions of generosity and faith. A strong proponent of collaboration and conversation, Dr. King is dedicated to facilitating conversations with and among faith leaders, donors, and fundraisers of all faiths around the intersections of faith and giving. It is this mission that brings us together this afternoon, and please join me in welcoming Dr. David King.
Thanks, Amir, and thank you all for being here. As the director of Lake Institute, it's my pleasure to add my welcome to Dean Pasek's for this, our 20th annual Thomas H. Lake Lecture. This lecture really is a highlight of our year, and our gathering this evening or this afternoon would not be possible without the example of Tom and Marjorie Lake and the philanthropic generosity in their honor by the Lilly Endowment, as well as the Karen Lake Buttry and Donald Buttry families. The Lake and Buttry families have helped instill a legacy of thinking deeply about the ways in which faith inspires and informs giving. We're so delighted to host this event here in our local Indianapolis community, and we really are grateful to Witherspoon Presbyterian Church for hosting us. Reverend Dr. Winterbourne Harrison Jones, the senior pastor here, is an outstanding alum of our Lilly Family School of Philanthropy and a tremendous leader across our city. And we're grateful to him and the entire staff and volunteers at Witherspoon for their hospitality. Let's give them one more round of applause. We're also delighted this year to partner with our colleagues from the Spirit and Place Festival as their first Big Tent Talk. And those of you here will no doubt appreciate the ongoing programming and public events that Spirit and Place brings to Indianapolis each and every year. And of course, our lecture would not be possible without all the amazing efforts of our Lake Institute and School of Philanthropy team and colleagues. Particularly shout out to Ann Brock, who's made much of this coordination possible. Our lecture this year also serves as a culmination of a two-day convening that Lake has co-hosted with our friends from Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary and the Center for the Church and Black Experience, centered on the theme of philanthropy and the Black church. And as we're wrapping up our second convening over these last few years on this important topic, we're grateful to those of you who've been here engaging with us deeply at this intersection over the last few days. We're grateful for the planning team that's put so much effort into that gathering, and particularly Dr. Reggie Blunt, a Lake Advisory Board member and director of the Center for the Church and Black Experience at Garrett. And LaCoya Gardner, the director of the School of Philanthropy's Mays Family Institute on Diverse Philanthropy. And we're extremely indebted again to Tasha Gibson, who tirelessly invested so many hours to ensure the success of our symposium and convening together. As you can see, a lot's happening at the School of Philanthropy and Lake Institute, and we would love to invite you to join us for any and all of our work. And as we turn to our Thomas H. Lake lecturer this evening, I'm delighted to introduce the Reverend Dr. Willie James Jennings. Dr. Jennings is the Andrew W. Mellon Professor of Theology and Africana Studies at Yale University Divinity School, born and raised in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and told us today that he's at home in the gray, bare trees of the Midwest. Dr. Jennings received his BA in Religion and Theological Studies from Calvin College, his Master of Divinity from Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California, and his PhD from Duke University. Dr. Jennings is simply one of the world's most respected and regarded Christian theologians. He's the author of The Christian Imagination, Theology and the Origins of Race, published by Yale University Press. The book has served as one of the most important books in theology over the last few decades, and is now a standard text read in colleges, universities, theological schools. Building upon that Christian imagination, his continuing groundbreaking work at the intersections of theology and race have led him to be the recipient of the 2015 Grawemeyer Award in Religion. Let's call it the Nobel Prize of Religious Studies. His commentary in the book of Acts won the Reference Book of the Year award from the Academy of Parish Clergy, and his most recent book, After Whiteness in Education and Belonging, which served as the inaugural book in the much anticipated book series Theological Education Between the Times, has already become an instant classic, winning the 2020 Book of the Year award from Publishers Weekly, selected as a finalist for the 2021 American Academy of Religion Book of the Year for Constructive Reflective Studies, and was the 2023 award winner for the Lilly Fellows Program Book Award. Currently, Dr. Jennings is hard at work on a multi-volume look at the doctrine of creation, tentatively entitled Reframing the World, Volume 2. I know these titles still change, but entitled Jesus and the Displaced, Race Theology and the Built Environment. His contributions as a public scholar also extend far beyond his publications, as Jennings is often a prolific speaker who's been selected for many prestigious lectures, including the Bampton Lectures in the University of Oxford, the Husserlian Lectures at Cambridge, Cole Lectures at Vanderbilt, Parks King Lectures at Yale, and the Thomas H. Lake Lecture at the School of Philanthropy. Now, Dr. Jennings is also no stranger to Indiana. He served as a regular consultant and mentor for the Wabash Center for Teaching and Learning and Theology and Religion, located at Wabash College, just down the road in Crawfordsville. And those that know Dr. Jennings are quick to point out not only his intellect and scholarship, but also his creativity and passion that he brings to this work. And that passion finds its way into his ministerial work in preaching and teaching, as a teacher and mentor to his students, and as a dialogue partner with colleagues across a breadth of disciplines. Now, a concern that sometimes arises for theologians in taking on these biggest of big questions in the way that Dr. Jennings so often does in his work is that the work can remain abstract and disconnected from our everyday life and practice. But Dr. Jennings is working precisely to counter that notion. Another gift that he brings to this work is the ability to bring these big ideas back home to invite us to see what this work might mean for us as leaders in our institutions and local communities. And that's also the overall hope of the Thomas H. Lake Lecture, and our hope for our conversation this afternoon as Dr. Jennings shares with us his lecture entitled Remaking the Commons, Forming a Moral Imagination for Possession and Philanthropy in Place. And before I invite Dr. Jennings up, let me say that we are grateful for all of you who have joined us here, and so many of you who are joining us on this conversation online from wherever you might be. After Dr. Jennings' lecture, we've invited Dr. Joseph Tucker Edmonds to continue the conversation and dialogue with Dr. Jennings. And I'm proud to say that Joseph is a Lake Institute Advisory Board member and affiliate faculty at the School of Philanthropy. But his primary appointment, when we can't get him over at the School of Philanthropy, is as an associate professor in Africana Studies and Religious Studies at Indiana University's School of Liberal Arts, Indiana University, Indianapolis, and as the associate director of the Center for the Study of Religion and American Culture. Joseph work too models scholarship that seeks to make an actual difference in our communities. His research addresses the intersection between Black religion and the body, with a particular focus on agency, care, and wellness. Dr. Tucker Edmonds is a founding member of the Black Health Equity Working Group at the IUI Center for Africana Studies and Culture, and is currently working with the local NAACP branch and the 4 largest hospital systems to address the disparate health outcomes for Black communities in Indianapolis. He's an award-winning teacher, a nationally recognized scholar, particularly around community-engaged research, and a recipient of the Indiana Humanities Wilma Gibbs Moore Fellowship, which supported his collective community-engaged project on the history of Black women's agency and the Phyllis Wheatley YWCA in Indianapolis, which you might ask him about the important historical marker that's coming to our town in just a few weeks. His book, The Other Church, Alternative Christian Movements and the Struggle for Black Freedom, was published in 2020, and we are looking forward to the discussion that Dr. Tucker Edmonds will lead with Dr. Jennings. And now please help me welcome Dr. Jennings to the stage for the Thomas H. Lake Lecture.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank Dr. King and Dr. Edmonds for this invitation and for hosting me since I've arrived into this beautiful land of Indiana and Indianapolis. It's a joy to be in the presence of your dean and to be at the Lake Institute and to be giving these wonderful lectures. As I stand here, I am giddy with joy as I'm looking out at you all. Many of you I know very well. I know how old you are, but I won't tell anyone. But it is incredible to see how well God has done with you. You look absolutely marvelous, marvelous. And I look good too. I would like to bring you warmest greetings from Dean Gregory Sterling, the faculty, the staff, and the students of Yale Divinity School, where I have the joy of serving. They would want me to bring warmest greetings to you, and I am glad to do that. I want to thank this wonderful church and the pastor who is absent for such hospitality that I've felt since I walked through the door. I had a chance to see this beautiful art, the beautiful art in the guest office when you come in, and the art in the pastor's office is fabulous. And I want to thank the pastor for the 3 pieces that I have already loaded up. This is about giving, you know, so I want to thank him for what he has given to me. It is a great joy to be in a church that understands the power of art, and a church that understands the power of African art. And so to be in this space is so refreshing and so edifying. So please thank the pastor, and I want to thank the church for all that you have done to create a space that only speaks of salvation, but the beauty of salvation. My friends, the question I would like to offer to shape my lecture today is simply this: who are my people? Who are my people? Now, let me just say, as I stand here, I realize this is a pulpit, and I'm a Baptist preacher, so I'm going to do the best I can not to give in to preaching. I'm going to offer this lecture. So let's come back to this question. Who are my people? My friends, this may be the most important question that we must answer at this moment. It is a question about belonging. But for peoples of faith, it is also a question about creating belonging. To create belonging is to respond to a strange calling, a peculiar vocation that inheres in the way of faith for so many people. At the heart of that calling, my friends, at the heart of that calling is the task of extending our lives outward into the lives of others. It is heavy work. It is the work of creating a kinship that will not yield. A kinship that will not yield no matter the time, no matter the situation. It will not yield. For many of us, That calling is rooted in a profound acknowledgement that we are created by the living God and joined together as creatures. Creatures who must create the commons. The commons. What is the commons? What is the commons? Great question. The commons is a place of sharing for the sake of thriving life, a place of sharing for the sake of thriving life. The commons is as ancient as creaturely life. It has existed since the beginning of creaturely community. It forms where needs are being met in ways that bring creatures together. It can sometimes be as simple as a watering hole, or the bank of a river, or a grassy field inhabited by fruit-bearing shrubs and trees. The commons is also an event when people share what they have, not only for the common good, but for creating the good in common. That is, helping to build a practice of reciprocity, where giving and receiving gives birth to more giving. Yet the commons, my friends, is also a way of thinking and a way of being where we are always oriented toward a life of sharing. That's my word, sharing. Knowing that what we have because someone shared with us. Together, these three forms of the common are necessary to create a life-giving reality of belonging. And today, we are in need, great need for them to be braided together in our communities. This afternoon, I would like to dream with you about what it might mean to remake the commons in our time and in our places of living, to remake the commons. Such remaking would help to form a moral imagination that is desperately needed right now, a moral imagination that guides both our understanding of possession and philanthropy on the ground. On the ground. To do this dreaming with you this afternoon, I will, of course, call upon the spirit of the poet and offer a few verses of my own in the course of my dreaming with you. I, Willie James Jennings, first learned of the commons on my bike. I was 10 years old when it started. My mother would give me a bag or a cloth satchel to carry over my shoulder and would send me all over the neighborhood with food from the garden. I would arrive at Mother Slater's house or Mother Pickens or Deacon Young's home or any number of folk in the community with these tomatoes and beans and potatoes, blackberries, corn, okra. Woo, still don't like okra. Or cucumbers. And I would unload my bag. Thank God. And then they would say, no, hold on, Willie, hold on. And they would reload my bag with what they were giving to me to take back home. And then when I got home, the route would start all over again. I was UPS before UPS. I was Amazon before Amazon on my little bike. On my bike, even with my small frame, I was an extension of the Commons. But the Commons was first located in my backyard, because that is where you found the garden of Mary and Ivory Jennings. My parents, like so many other displaced Southerners who came north during the Great Migration, brought with them those skills, those exquisite skills of cultivating life from the dirt. My mother tried to teach me what it meant to know the dirt, to be of the dirt, to live from the dirt. It didn't work too well. Allow me to share a poem with you entitled Garden Disciple, Garden Disciple. She called me to the garden, that ritual of spring, announcing new life. There my mother on bended knee in black Michigan dirt, as if praying like in church or at her bed, made me join her on the ground, now made ready through her sweat and knowledge and water. Reach your hand in deep, she demanded, and I knew what my obedience would mean. Now I would feel the wet soil covering my hand, enveloping my wrist, pulling up my arms, pulling me in. Boy, that's life, she would say. Do you feel it? The blank stare on my face, covered with boredom, told her I did not. I was spring, and too young to feel soil knowledge. She smiled and told me, go get her seeds, dried and stored, hidden from winter for such a time as this. Her planting begun, her mind focused on a future that only she could see in the ground, each spot chosen for the plant that would bear witness. Soon, her time of planting would be done. My time of planting has now come. My mother and my father were garden disciples. Garden disciples. They knew how to listen to the dirt, how to touch and be touched by dirt and plant. And in this way, they were drawing on ancient Native American and African soil knowledge. But they were garden disciples in that other way. They knew how to be refreshed by the land. My parents had a pair of those old lawn chairs, you know, the metal kind that when you sit in the chair, your butt almost touches the ground, you know, the kind, and they spring. You know, some of those old lawn chairs. They would sit in those chairs in the cool of the summer evening, letting the wind blow across their bodies, their hands caressing the ground as they laughed and talked while they cooked something on the grill. You can see it, can't you? There I watched as their bodies were renewed, their energy slowly being restored. It was as though they were coming back to themselves there near the garden, close to the dirt. But this was no private affair, my friends, because if you stood in my backyard, you could look all the way down to the end of the street, through the backyards and the gardens of their neighbors, all of them displaced Southerners who knew the dirt and shared the same soil knowledge. My parents and the other black folks in the neighborhood knew how to align their lives with the giving of the earth, with the gifts born of the dirt. Their faith, their Christian faith, instructed them in what that alignment should mean. One word: giving. Giving. The God who created them carried them in God's mighty hands, possessed them through the Holy Spirit, and now they were held in the giving reality of this God's creation. In a real sense, they were possessed by the dirt, held in its giving life, given by God. In this way, my parents were echoing, in part, an ancient sensibility of so many indigenous peoples who understood and yet understand that when you perceive the land rightly, you will understand that we are possessed by the land, held in the intelligibility of the land in its giving and receiving, and that your life depended on rightly aligning your living with that giving and receiving. I learned early from my parents that the church and the garden were inextricably bound together, confirming each other. Together, they were the sites of divine instruction. Together, they were the sites of discipleship. Together, they were the places of holy consolation, where black life that was under threat, could be held close, held safe, and loved. I learned that there was a bond of love, deep and wide and deep, between someone praying for me in church and serving me apple pie made from Michigan apples, McIntosh, Lord have mercy, McIntosh. Or someone preaching a sermon that seems just for me, and someone giving me blackberry cobbler, Lord have, made from the blackberries growing in their backyard. I can taste that right now. The church and the garden were joined, and together they were a healing community and an engine of our informal economy. Between the church and the garden, I learned of a holy exchange. Not only Jesus' life for our life, but the exchange of the good gifts of the earth between one another. In the summer months, fresh fruits and vegetables, eggs and meats, especially from the pig, passed from home to home, especially homes in great need. And when the weather turned cold and money remained slight, those same homes received foods that had been canned, preserved, and stored for the winter. With little money available, what little money available was joined with an abundance of healthy food, and together a way was made out of no way through the dirt and prayer. Now, my friends, what would it mean to locate our lives between the giving of God and the giving of the ground? And by the ground, I include the sea and the air and our animal kin who give their lives for us. What would it mean to locate all our giving between our holy places, whether church or mosque or synagogue or temple, and the dirt and the garden and the plants that sustain us? I know, as many of you know, that there is a growing appreciation for gardens and community gardens. I'm glad about that. But I'm asking about something far more substantive than that appreciation. I am asking what it would mean to remake the commons in our lives and by our living. It would mean seeing and sensing the deep reality of connectivity that constitutes our lives, and then aligning our living and our giving with that connectivity. Allow me to share another poem entitled, "What If They Claimed You?" What if they claimed you? This is part of a series of poems called the What If Poems. I'm just going to share this one with you. That great getting up morning, we woke to vines joined to our skin. So tightly, so completely, the entire medical establishment could not distinguish between flesh and vine, connecting through buildings, roads, and highways, across bodies of waters, mountains, valleys, running through walls, halls, malls, ballparks, connecting each of us to trees big and small, healthy and diseased. Vines that respected only the lines they created. The chemical Bayer Monsanto's created to kill the vines, dissolve them, they said, would also destroy our flesh. And that was a non-starter. But everything got much better when we yielded to the ubiquity of the bees and the other bugs, the worms and the birds. Then fruit started growing everywhere between our bodies. Berries, apples, pears, peaches, grapes, every fruit. Then people formed new fruits by simply dreaming them up together. It was only then that we began to see the beauty of the vines. Their stunning shapes, their knots, their grooves, their different colors in the sun, matching and enhancing the different shades and textures of our skin. Finally, we could see what all this was. We could see what we were. Lovely weeds. Connectivity, in many ways, my friends, connectivity, in many ways, is a hard-won revelation. It is a hard-won revelation. It is one thing to acknowledge that all things are connected at the level of the biological or the ecological or even the spiritual. But it is another thing to sense that connectivity and to align our giving to that sensing. This is the difference that giving in faith, giving through faith can make in this world. Rather than thinking of giving out of a framework of investment and productivity or return on investment, to think of giving from our faith means thinking toward the remaking of the commons. To sense and know connectivity is to be turned irreversibly toward the remaking, and that remaking involves everything. It weaves the body, the building, and design together. And by that I mean it weaves together our lives with our built environment. The built environment is all that human-made structure, all the human-made structure of living, from houses to neighborhoods, from cities to towns, sidewalks, landscapes, highways. They all must be rethought toward the remaking of the commons. To remake the commons means we order our lives and our giving toward the formation of places, events, and ways of being in the world that announce not simply a life of sharing, but structures of living that permanently inscribe giving. And this requires that we rethink. One crucial idea, my friends, the idea of ownership. Our modern idea of ownership formed explicitly through the juridical and bureaucratic developments in the New Worlds around everything from the owning of slaves and other chattel, all the way to land ownership and ownership of one's labor and one's body. That idea was formed through one fundamental belief, and that is that the world and everything in it can and should and must be owned. That is a vision of owned existence and life lived through propertied relations. And from that idea has formed an arrangement that now threatens life itself. From the multiple wars being fought over land right now, to our global pandemic of homelessness right now, to our unrelenting struggles against the oligarchic forces of real estate and development, to the horrible loss of human life through displacement, to the continued enslavement and destruction of our planet, place by place, we can see the horror of our commitment to the prevailing belief in ownership. That belief in ownership gave rise to a sick and deformed spirituality of ownership, one that demands ownership to establish both a sense of spiritual and material freedom. This legacy continues to shape the way people claim themselves through self-possession and claim property as extensions of themselves. Extensions of the self. The spirit of ownership claiming the body, that is self-possession. The spirit of ownership extending the body into the dirt, that is private property, pressing the body across the land. The spirit of ownership that as it grows from the colonial period forward allows all of us to envision our bodies extending into the land and enabling us to sense and embrace the creation as that which we can own. To touch my land is to touch my body. To violate my own space is to violate my very body. And graveyards are full of people who did such touching and such violating. This spirituality of ownership forms the horizon upon which to understand the development of ideas like sovereignty and autonomy and recognition and territoriality and of course, nationalism. Nationalism of blood and soil, of a people bound to a land through possession. And the spirit of ownership. That spirit of ownership gave life to a distorted love of land. That distorted love of land weaves belonging with ideas of private property and collective territory, border and boundary. This is a strained, even tragic sense of belonging. We meet with this spirit of ownership a dismal connection of body and land, made possible through the relentless struggle to claim and sustain possession all the way from lands to our own bodies. This is my body, I own it. Possession with this spirituality is life, and dispossession is death. If our way of seeing and relating to the living world and each other has been formed inside the spirituality of ownership, then to think a different way, of seeing and relating to the world and ourselves would mean thinking against what seems obvious, necessary, irreversible, and natural. Let me say that again. It would require thinking against what seems obvious, necessary, irreversible, and natural. This means that to think of giving rooted in the commons, is to think against the natural by aligning ourselves with what is actually natural. So here, I want to turn your attention very briefly, and I promise I'm not going to turn this into a Bible study, but I just want to turn your attention very briefly. I'm certainly not going to preach, but I'm going to turn it very simply to a story from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19. Chapter 19, verses 1 through 9. Chapter 19, verses 1 through 9. And it's not going to be the King James Version, but it's just chapter 19, verses 1 through 9. It is that story of Zacchaeus and the tree. Let me read it to you just for memory's sake. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." So he hurried down and was happy to welcome him. All who saw it began to grumble and said, "He has gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner." Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, half," I like that word, "half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much." Then Jesus said to him, Today, salvation has come to this house, because he too, even this rich sinner, is a son of Abraham. Now, as most New Testament scholars will tell you, this is an idealized tax collector. Idealized. One who knows that he has indeed defrauded people, who knows he has enjoyed the privileges of life in the empire, but he also knows that he is in the presence of prophet Jesus and in the presence of God. Climbing the sycamore tree facilitated something. It facilitated his seeing and being seen. And in the story, that climbing is a beautiful precursor to a life that must change. Follow me. There from the tree, he receives the invitation that Jesus offers to him to commune with Zacchaeus, an invitation that scandalizes Jesus' listeners. But Jesus is acquainted with scandal because, he is the son of Mary. And so being identified with sinners is not new for him. Being in the tree, Zacchaeus is in the place where he may sense the gracious giving of God found in that tree. A tree that offers fruit to everyone, shade for everyone, life for everyone. Zacchaeus responds to the gracious invitation of Jesus with a commitment to justice. He will give to the poor half of what he owns, and he will enter a work of reparation to those from whom he has stolen, giving back 4 times as much, he will give. Like the tree, he will give like the sycamore tree, and thereby form with Jesus a place and a life of giving. Let me share another poem with you, this one entitled The Clearing, inspired by the great Toni Morrison. A poem entitled The Clearing. And then we will take on old flesh in the clearing, just beyond the sound of authority and the smell of brutality. It will be flesh of bone-bound dirt, and dirt-formed bone caressed by independent winds, each a story of arrival from here and there. This is prophet flesh. It will not burden alone, being vines of glory, ever weaving knotted knowledge, formed of sun listening and body believing. Who would leave such a place where flesh knows its one destiny, to be held and to hold? Zacchaeus, in our text, has entered the living presence of God. And I want to note the effect of God's giving presence in Jesus. The divine presence is always a giving presence that draws us into a life of sharing. God is the one who gathers us in Israel's hope and invites us to life together. Here we are called by the Spirit to a new work of sharing, living, and shared, creating, shared by all. What then would it look like to see from Zacchaeus' tree, my friend? It would mean that the divine giving presence would supplant the spirit of ownership. It would mean that we would begin to crumble ownership from within. There in the presence of Jesus, Zacchaeus has entered a new trajectory, a new direction with a new intensity of being claimed by God, a direction that leads to a powerful alignment of his life with that sycamore tree and with it's a form of abundant giving. What would it mean? What would it mean to have our lives aligned with the abundant giving that we meet in this world, with plant and animal, earth, sky, sun, and wind? Such alignment would reconfigure our built environments toward the commons to structure justice, to structure care, to structure concern and support and love into the way neighborhoods are formed and communities develop, into the way cities are refurbished and maintained. It would be giving rooted in the commons. And if so, then it must work its way down to how we imagine housing and building and living, not only through the democratization of design, but also into a shared dreaming of actual life together. I began my lecture with that urgent question: who are my people? The answer to that question is not one of genealogy or history for peoples of faith, but one of philanthropy, aimed at creating a people shaped in the sharing that is at the heart of their lives, rooted in a giving that they understand is the very reason for our existence. Why are we here? God gave. That's why. These are the words that form the deepest rationale for our giving. We give because God not only gave, but God is endless giving, without hesitation and without exhaustion. If we give in the knowledge of God's endless giving, then we must reconfigure our living to make real this knowledge in our built environments and in the way we live in our communities. Allow me, my friends, to share a final poem entitled, Touch a Sign, Touch a Sign. In the moments of my doubting, when old sorrows, inherited and therefore unearned, steal into my thinking space, constricting my mind breathing, the old folks taught me to touch a sign. They said, open the windows, hear the wind signifying through the trees, see the ground stand at attention at the sun's gaze, the light dancing with the leaves, sense in the small silences between the robin's cry and the bluebird's shouting, the slow forming of an amen. And remember how we can dream as we awake, and why we love even if pain greets the day. On those days when my doubting refuses to yield, emboldened by injustice and willful ignorance, nurtured by the rain of insults, each one stinging like biting flies and smooth sucking mosquitoes. At the appointed hour of their choosing, when the sun shows its wisdom, dark tan mothers of the temple everywhere, lead me outside while inside, and inside while outside. Place my body next to that old tree, its branches stretched out as if suspended in air, creating a canopy from which to hang melancholies alongside sparkling joys. I drop my head and realize I am standing on its roots, big, thick things, one with the black dirt constituting the ground, the floor of it all. The tree says to me, nothing becomes, nothing thrives without this grace. To give, knowing that we are graced, expands our vision of philanthropy beyond transactional thinking and into a reality of thankfulness for life. Most of the churches I attended all my life had a ritual they performed after receiving the offering from the congregation. With heads turned toward the cross, we would all stand and sing the words, all things come of thee, O Lord, and of thine own have we given thee. And then we would sing the Amen, often in beautiful three-part harmony. The Amen always means that we are calling for the actualization, the realization of what is being said in our concrete living. The Amen in this regard calls for its repetition, the again and again that mirrors the repetition of God's giving to us. God again and again offers us the grace of creation, offers us God's own giving presence. These words also acknowledge a relational density that points to God as the source of existence and the source that sustains life itself. Thus, these words start us with the commons, and they orient us back to it as our destiny, not only to respond by giving, but also to be the response to the giving. Giving created us, and giving will recreate us as the family of God. And my friends, that is worthy of dreaming. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Now, y'all know y'all can do better than that. Yep. This man done preached, he done lectured, he done read poetry to us. And we are blessed to be in the presence of this witness this afternoon. And so I want to jump right in, Dr. Jennings, and I want to begin with, asking you to bring this home, to bring this to the everyday, to bring this to the conditions and the situations in which we currently occupy. You define the commons as having three distinctive qualities. You said one, it was a place for sharing for the sake of thriving life. You said two, it was an event where people not only share the common, but they create the good in common. And you said three, it is an epistemological project. Yeah, you said that.
I said that.
You said it is a way
That's beautiful, man.
a way of thinking, right?
Yes, sir.
But I want to understand with you, because usually our understanding of the common is that it is temporary, it is optional, or it is exclusive. That we leave our own homes or our places of belonging, and that we then enter into the common, right? A place that is outside, that is different, that is distinct from us. And so I want you to talk a little bit with us about how do we overcome the idea of the commons as short-lived, ephemeral, or optional?
That's a great question. For me, it begins with the reality of our own spiritual discernment. Do we discern need in ways that do not overwhelm us, but energize us to build new possibilities from where we are? All of you, I'm sure, know someone, some of you may be that person, the person in the neighborhood that becomes everybody's relative.
Yeah.
So folk come to you for their $5. They come to you, I ran out of mayonnaise, can I get some from you? They come to you because they know not that you are a patsy, but that they know that in you, you sense their need. You know the difference between when they're trying to shake you down and when they actually have need. And there is something about that reality of discernment that I believe is available to all of us. Because that discernment of need is, when you press to its heart, it is a discernment of connection. It is a recognition of not only that we are all connected, but that I am not only responsible, but resourced by that connection. That caring for people is a part of what it means for me to live in a place and sense the place caring for me. And so the idea of the commons for us, inside of a life of faith, it is our lives turned always outward, not simply in giving, but in receiving from the reality of being creatures. The difficulty is that there's so much in our lives that constantly pushes against that. Fear, greed, practices of hoarding. There's so much that push against our willingness to open ourselves to the Spirit to allow us to become sites of sharing. And for us to then look into our communities to see how we might together create sites of sharing. What would it mean if there was a community in which people know that no one in this community is going to go hungry? No one in this community is going to sleep on the street, because we simply would not allow it. That we have created these structures. Sometimes they have to be renegade structures, guerrilla structures. Sometimes they can be structures that build inside of government processes. But the point is that we will build this, not because it's the right thing to do, it's because of who we are. It is the right thing to do, but it's because of who we are. And so my life of giving is a life that orients me away from the sick, deformed visions of possessive life that are killing us, quite frankly. They are killing us. I mean, let's just take a common example that all of us know very well. The way each of us generates trash. The way each of us generates so much trash. That reality is important for us to meditate upon. Because there was a time, believe it or not, when people did not generate trash. Can you believe that? There was a time when people didn't generate trash. But what does it mean to have a life that generates trash? That's a form of connectivity. That's a form of a commons, but it's a commons you don't want to have anything to do with. And so let's meditate on what it would mean to reverse the generation of trash to the generation of a life of sharing.
I want to push on that because I think this notion of like reversing this problem of waste, this disconnection from the land, and you begin this afternoon by talking about your mother and your father being garden disciples.
Yes.
You remember that?
Yes.
And I think that many of us, and I'm going to speak for myself right now, folks, we are disconnected from our gardens, right? You know, I have no interest in, I don't want to be near them. I don't want to have this connection. So I want you to talk to me a little bit, Willie, Dr. Jennings, and tell me how I get reconnected with the garden. Because, you know, as I heard you talk about this, I was thinking about Alice Walker and search of our mother's gardens, right? And, you know, going back to these places, find them. How do we foster this reconnection, right?
That's a wonderful question. It has to begin with us, I'm going to use these words, contemplating and meditating upon our food. So this food comes to you, and it would be good for you to ask yourself the question constantly, where does this come from? How many hands touch this in order for me to have this? Think less about how much it costs. I'm not telling you not to think about how much it costs, but ask the question, where does it come from? And then recognize that if you have no answer to that question, something is wrong in you. If you have no connection to the dirt, something is wrong. Now, the point is not to make you feel guilty. It's for you to recognize the deep levels of disconnection, the deep operation of disconnection, that we actually believe we can function without the dirt. No dirt, no you. I mean, that's not a provocative, it's the truth. No dirt, no you. No soil knowledge, no you. Now, obviously, the challenge for us is because we have disconnected the body from the land. We've disconnected the vision of salvation of the body from the land. It means that we have to do hard work to reconnect to the reality that God made. God created us in dirt. And so what does that mean, my dear brother? It means, so you have a wonderful daughter.
Yes.
I have children. Now, I'm being honest here. My mother took me out to the garden every spring to my complaining. And do you think I have a good garden? I do not. So I'm going to confess that when my mother was still alive, she would say, boy, you make me so ashamed. Because now, if I wanted to, I could probably, now, I admit I'm married to a gardener, so I can always claim her. But the reality of it is that I recognize that there is something missing, not only in my living, but in my thinking. This is what I want to say. There's something about a lack of connectivity to the dirt that weakens your sense of relationality, right? When the folk started me going from house to house to take this fruit, these vegetables, this meat, these eggs try to keep the eggs from messing up. Or, ooh, on a bite, that was something. What they were doing was not simply showing me their connectivity to the land, but my connectivity. They were not simply showing me their relation to our neighbors, but my relation. The density of their relations with one another was built upon the density of their connection to the dirt. And for so many of us, this is why it really is easy for us to move from place to place and not worry about the relationships we end or start, because there's no depth of it. You know, we can go to a place and all we need to know when we get to a place is, where's the Starbucks? Where's Whole Foods? Where can I find a barber, beautician? I'm good, I'm set. What plants are here? What's the shape of the ground? What's the typography? I don't care. There is something deeply wrong with not even wanting to know how the ground works, how to sense it, right? How to know it, how to understand who you are in it. And all of this means, as I like to say, that we who are Christian, I can't speak for other faiths, but we are Christian, we don't really have a doctrine of creation. We believe in creation, but we don't know what that means. Right. We think it's just a bunch of ideas that God created. No, creation has to do with dirt. Do you believe in the dirt? I don't even know what the dirt is.
I mean, because you're making this connection for us. And I want to continue to extend it. You're saying that if we have a disordered relationship with the dirt, with the garden, we'll have a disordered relationship with our faith. And if we have a disordered relationship with our faith, we are ultimately going to have a disordered relationship with giving.
With giving, and yes, you're exactly right, and with recognizing need around us.
Okay.
So many years ago, I was in South Africa, and I was at a mall in Durban, South Africa. Massive 3-story mall. I mean, a massive mall, as massive as the mall in Minnesota, massive mall. And I was with my host and guests, and so I was a guest and my host, and we went into the mall. We walked around the mall. I couldn't believe it. Then we came outside the mall, and the mall was filled with, Mercedes and all the kind of nice cars. And at the end of the parking lot, follow me, friends, at the end of the parking lot was a shanty town, right next to the mall. We were walking to the car, and I stopped, and I looked, mall, shanty town, mall, shanty town. And my host said, "What's wrong, Willie?" I said, "What's wrong? There's cardboard houses, 10 houses here next to this mall." And my host just shrugged his shoulders. Yeah. What am I driving toward? Without a sense of connectivity, we don't grasp the immorality of the built environment. This is the built environment is immoral. The built environment is immoral, and we have to sense the immorality of spaces that no one can thrive, the immorality of spaces that lack trees and grass, the immorality of spaces that by their very character, by their very shape, are meant to harm people, are meant to destroy relationships. So this is what's so crucial about connectivity. Yeah. This is what's so crucial about understanding that there is a giving of the body and there's a giving of the built environment. And all I want you is to tie those two things together. Think not only about what comes out of your pockets, but think about the shape of a neighborhood and how it resists giving.
Yeah. But I want you to dig even more into that, because I think the way that we justify the proximity of poverty towards, besides wealth, the lack of access beside folks who have more than enough access, is that we have convinced ourselves that we are poor, that we have scarcity, that we don't have enough, and that allows us then to connect our lives to an acquisitive, to a controlling and a dominating kind of model, right?
You're exactly
and
right.
so how do we get over this fact that we are not scarce? And for many of us, scarcity populates every aspect of our daily existence.
That is exactly right. And So we have to come back to the ancient wisdom of a shared cucumber. You got two, you're only gonna eat one. A shared sweet potato. Apples from your tree, blackberries from your yard. There's a reality that the ground, when cared for, is endlessly giving. And if you listen to it to know when its cycles of giving are, you can form your life to it. So there's a reality of giving that is a part of our very existence. But there's another thing that's in the built environment that all of us know, but none of us ever talks about. We have placed meritocracy in the ground itself.
Yeah. Yes.
So the fact that these neighborhoods don't have the basic resources they need, that's their fault.
Right.
And we're going to build into the very ground that lack as their fault. They don't have any libraries over there. They don't have a swimming pool over there. Well, that's their fault. How do you build meritocracy into the dirt? All of these resources are here because these people earned it and deserved it, and these people don't. If there's anything that is a profound insult of creation itself, it's to inscribe meritocracy into the earth. So what does that mean? It means that it makes no moral sense for one neighborhood to have what another neighborhood doesn't. Now, of course, we understand that the way communities have been shaped and built. I was just in Little Rock, Arkansas last week, and in Little Rock, those of you who know Little Rock, Arkansas, the way the topography works and the way the land works is that the water runs downhill from the areas that are well-resourced to the areas that are not. So the flooding runs downhill. The garbage runs downhill. The waste runs downhill. That is not by accident. And so harm is built into the environment. Meritocracy is built into the environment. Unearned recognition that life deserves to be cherished, and some life is treated as though it doesn't deserve to be cherished, is written into the ground. So our giving must reach into the ground. We have to start to rethink these configurations, challenge them, not based on price points and how much homes cost, or police protection, and certainly not based on zoning. Don't get me started on zoning, because it'll be 2 o'clock in the morning, and is he still talking? But you understand what I'm saying. This gets back to your crucial point. Scarcity and meritocracy are very strange bedfellows.
Yeah. And so how do we course correct, Dr. Jennings?
Yes.
Right? Because meritocracy is really the logic that we have operated with modern day philanthropy. Those who have benefited in an unequal, unfair economic system have the power to give at will, at whim, and those who don't or who have not benefited have to wait upon the good graces of those that have.
Yes.
And so you are suggesting that philanthropy is not about this exchange of cash or economic coin, but rather it is the creation of a people. So talk to me about how do we radically change folks for whom they have historically and into the contemporary moment benefited from the current arrangements that they live under?
This is a great question, and this is why I am pressing of the importance of the commons, and to think that question. What the question that has to be in our hearts and in our minds when we touch our resources is, how am I creating a people with this? Not how am I caring for a problem.
Yeah.
Not how am I keeping a problem from coming to my neighborhood.
Right.
But how am I creating a people with what I have? And so if you ask that question, if you only have a little bit, you have 2 cucumbers. That's all you got. You have a bag of sweet potatoes that someone brought to you and you want to split them. That's the question. You have $1 million and you want a tax write-off for like $300,000 of it. That's the question. you have these extra resources and you want to invest. Let's just set the word investment aside. Take that question. What people? What people am I building? Now, of course, what's implicated in that, Dr. Edmonds? What's implicated in that? That I'm a part of these people.
Right.
That what I'm doing with my resources are calling people to life with me, not creating Jim Crow realities.
Right.
Not creating some, okay, I'm giving you enough so that you can have your own, and I got my own.
Right.
You doing good? Good. No, what you are going after now is a reality of belonging. Philanthropy is about creating belonging. Why? Because this is one planet. You know, there are people, I'm sure there's some people, maybe not here because you're all wonderful, but you know there are people who believe that we have separate water. There are people who believe that they have their own water. I'm saying, I said, tell me how many of you have your own water? Hands went up. I said, you got your own water? We don't have separate water. Okay, this is a shock for some people. Let me say it again. We don't have separate water. One source of water. That's it. And so the idea that there is a giving that would allow us to continue to think of segregated ways of being is just unbelievably backward thinking. Everything we do in giving, if it is aimed in the right direction, is aimed toward life together. Always aimed toward life together. It's always aimed toward not just a building up of those over there. It's a building up of us together. But now, of course, this is resisted.
Yes.
We know it's resisted. I mean, this is part of the racial fabric of the Western world. It's resisted. And we understand what that means. It means that at the end of the day, our giving can be thwarted. And our giving can be used demonically to reinforce separate but equal existence. And I know there are some people these days, especially given what's going on, that there's some folks who are looking at separate but equal existence and starting to romanticize it. And I understand it. I can understand that, you know, but I'm going to come back to the truth of the matter. I don't have separate water. And last I checked, there are no separate realities of water or air or food or plants or seeds. And so we can talk about the glory days of when the black community was just all by itself. But friends, please, please, even then we didn't have separate water, y'all. Even then we didn't have separate air. Let's not think in the face of violence and threat that separate but equal actually is a strategy for living. It is not a strategy for living. It's a strategy for dying. It's a strategy for violence. The strategy for living has to be a strategy of giving, of shared giving, of working toward the common that all can start to imagine a future inside of, a reality in which that giving constitutes a new way of being for us and our children. And from that, we can start to see the possibilities of a future that we cannot imagine in the present because we have oriented our lives to this possibility, right? How many of us remember those folk who created that space? You know, Auntie's house or Mama's house or Deacon Jones's house or the church or some place where there were some people, a community center, where there were these folk who created this space. And even for a little while, it opened up possibilities that literally saved some people's lives. They went to that space. They hung out in that space. Food was brought to that space. Bro, come on over here. Somebody just brought some sweet potatoes and somebody brought some banana pudding. Come over here. Put that basketball down. Eat this banana pudding, boy. That has saved so many lives. All I'm pressing us toward is to recognize that that is deeply of the life of God.
Yeah.
Deeply of the life of God. Just add this one thing. I'm not going to preach, but but it comes to mind is the words of Jesus when he stood up and said, I am the bread of life. Come and eat me. That, and nobody can understand those words. Right. Come and eat me. Yeah. That's what we're talking about.
That's what we're talking about. And I think that what we're also asking, and I want to remind folks that, this is the Lake Lecture on faith and giving. And I want you to end right now and help us think about what is the particular role that faith communities have in reshaping this relationship to giving, right? Because we have people have gathered here to say, we've got one relationship to giving. It's not working.
Yes.
And so you were suggesting that there is another relationship.
Yeah.
What should faith organizations and communities be doing that looks different?
We have to articulate giving not simply as an activity, but as a way of life. A way of life that means philanthropy is, at its heart, always opening us to, in a sense, fundamentally recreating ourselves in the giving. Yeah. And that giving, as I said a moment ago, is what opens up new possibilities for people to see life together in ways that they have not seen it before. That these folk are together, and they are literally offering themselves to one another, creating this space where I might actually not simply receive, but offer myself. Yeah. And that's what you want, right? If there's anything our foreparents taught many of us, is that you have to give. Because that's how I created you. And for you not to give is to deny yourself. Yeah. And that would be fantastic philanthropy, to believe that that's exactly who you are.
Definitely. And I want to end with this, and I want to end with a note from your poetry, Dr. Jennings, because you populated your talk with poetry and with prose and with scripture. But at the end of one of your poems, you said, we are those lovely weeds. And I just want you to just talk to us as we end today to think about what it might look like to exist in and amongst our community, in and amongst those who we love and those that we don't love that much, as lovely weeds. Like, what are you trying to evoke for us with that image and that metaphor, and how does that spring us forward as a call for action?
That's a great, and I think you all probably picked up. You all know by using the word "we" what I meant, right? I meant that it gets into places that you don't want it to be in, and that you can't kill it. Every time you try to kill it, you look around and it's over there, and then you go over there, it's over here. And so what winds up happening is that at some point in time, you just have to give into the weeds. It's okay, look, that's just going to be weeds over there, because I'm not going to keep trying to pull that up. And there's a reality to the power of the weed that we have to contemplate. It will go where it wants. It will be in places where it shouldn't. It will grow under any conditions. And it will find its way to weave itself with every life-giving plant. It's going to be a part. And many weeds will mimic that plant. You can't tell the weed from the plant. There's some weeds that look like flowers. I remember I was in my yard, I said, oh, look at that flower. And my wonderful wife said, Willie, that's a weed. That don't flower. I said, but it's pretty. It's a pretty weed. It's a weed. I said, no, let's leave it. It's a flower. This is gospel, huh? That we overcome death. We overcome separation. We overcome alienation. We are always someplace where people think something cannot grow. And there it is. It's not just growing, it's thriving. And if you're not careful, it will absolutely take over that space. That's what we want. That's what we want.
I want to thank everyone for coming out this evening. But I also want to thank Dr. Willie Jennings for helping us to remake and rethink the commons. for sharing his insight, and for spending time this evening with us.
And thanks Joseph for teasing out some of those wonderful questions, and Dr. Jennings for a wonderful lecture. Part of what we want to do at Lake Institute and the School of Philanthropy is to help build those connections so that we can make those relationships happen, so that we can bring about the commons that Dr. Jennings was pointing us to. And so we'd love to continue to be in relationship and conversation with you at the school and at Lake Institute. But one way that we can do that, those of you who are here, and we're thankful for all those who joined us online, is to join us for a reception at the conclusion of our lecture. Just downstairs, you'll see some of us out there pointing you in the right direction. So we are really grateful for the chance to be together and to listen, to learn, and then to put into action some of what we've heard today. So thank you again, Dr. Jennings, Dr. Tucker Edmonds, and thank you all for being a part of our Thomas H. Lake lecture this evening. Thank you.